LIMELIGHT era negatiddwako omuganda wange Apollo live.
Sanyuse nange.
Amawulire gatambudde ne gatambula olunaku olwaleero aba NRM babaddemu kamyufu kaabwe kwetoloola eggwanga lyonna. Okalabye otya?
Well, akalulu katambudde bulungi oba oli awo wadde mulimu ebirumira tebyotasobola kwewala. Ndoza bye tulabyeko olwaleero tubadde abamu tubisuubira fe abadde bagoberera ebyafaayo by'akalulu ka NRM oba oli awo byabaddewo twadde tubisuubira. Naye katulinde tulabe ripooti enkomeredde eneevaayo oba oli awo tumanye oba waliwo ekirungi ekyeyongeddeko oba byongedde ate okwonooneka.
SOPs nga tebazigoberedde n'akatono mu bitundu ebisinga tebalabuddwa.
Kyannaku nti ebyobufuzi ate bitwerabiza ensonga enkulu ey'obulamu nti tubadde tukimanye nti bwe tukola oba bwe tweyisanga bwe beeyisiza osobola okuvaawo ate ng'ofunye ekirwadde otubuulyawo ne kikutwalako n'obulamu. So kyannaku kibeere ekyokulabirako obuulyawo nti gye tulaga mu maaso awo mu kalulu akajeno wabeerewo ekyenjawulo ekikolebwa.
Okay. Weewaawo tugenda mu the limelight sigala ng'okyali kusootera.
A section of Ugandans living around Bugoma forest in southwestern Uganda have implored government not to surrender Bugoma forest to Hoima Sugar Limited for sugarcane growing.
Kongole kya NEMA kye twakwasa obuyinza n'obwesige okutukuumira ebintu ebikwatagana n'environment okuvayo n'efulumya ekiwandiiko ekiraga nti ebitundutundu ebimu ku Bugoma forest bagenda biwaayo mu kulima sukaali kulima ebikajjo.
Tekisobola kugenda tukyetaagira ddala singa kinaavaawo kitegeeza naffe tukosebwa embeera y'obudde ejja kukyuka bwe twogerera nti tukyalina na mbeera ya budde eri fixed.
The part of the forest in question is approximately 5,579 hectares, hosting over 255 bird species and 500 chimpanzees.
Kawaida akalala aka 245 A ba nesa ngako kawa parliament obuyinza parliament ya Uganda kajiwa obuyinza okukuuma ebitonde bya Uganda nawe tutambulira abantu ina wa parliament gorabako.
NEMA gave to Hoima Sugar Factory, and this certificate was signed on the 14th of August. That is about 1 week from now. And according to this document, they mentioned that whereas they have approved the activities to be carried out on that land, they still hope that the sugar factory will get relevant approvals.
The residents neighboring the forest vowed to sue government if it insists on giving away the forest land for sugarcane growing.
Tuvuddeyo nga tugamba Bugoma forest tegenda kutwalibwa. Tujja kukola kyonna, tujja kukwatagana wamu ne bannaffe abalala bonna abaakuno ab'ebweru abavubuka mmwe bannamawulire bano balooya baffe be tulina buli kubo lyonna erinaatuyamba tutaase Bugoma tugenda ddikwata.
For some time, tension between government and residents has been brewing over this forest land that the government wants to give away to the investor to plant sugarcane. Through their legal team, the residents pledged that they would not allow the National Environmental Management Authority to trade off the forest land for sugarcane plantation. They also called upon the President of Uganda to intervene into the matter to save the forest land so that this forest doesn't go away as it has been happening in other places. Meanwhile, NEMA, through its public relations officer Naomi Namala, dismissed the reports as false and untrue.
Bunyoro Kingdom, eitaka nga kingdom zonna bwe zibeera n'amataka gaazo. Kingdom ettaka yalina before 1995 tewanabaawo ekiragiro kya environment. Kati kweri ettaka Bugoma forest nayo nga kweri bwe bagamba balizinga ettaka lyabwe bafunemu ssente ku musigansimbi anaalimawo sukaali nebaweereza square miles z'ettaka 22. Bwe bajja mu NEMA okusaba olukosa nga bwe banaakozesa square miles zaabwe 22, NEMA nebagamba zonna ze munaakozesa kubanga paati emu eri mu kibira. Ja basalirako square miles 9 ezitali mu kibira kya Bugoma.
And this is the Limelight.
Hello and welcome to the program. I am Sima Polo and this is the Limelight. According to the 2016 report from the National Forest Authority, Uganda forest cover was depleted up to 9% from 24% in the 1990s, with 250,000 hectares of forest cover lost between 2005 and 2010. Depletion of forest cover is done through encroachment, deforestation, rampant felling of trees for timber and charcoal, and conversion of forest land into other land uses, including agriculture. On the contrary, about 7,000 hectares of planted forest have been established every year for the last 15 years, leaving a huge deficit which presents far-reaching implications to a country that has been regarded as the food basket of the region. Following these trends, Uganda may not have any forest left in the next 83 years due to high population growth unless serious interventions are executed not only by government but also from the international community. Besides, the population is set to suffer harsh effects of climate change, including severe and frequent droughts, which will in turn affect the agriculture sector, leading to impacts such as famine, malnutrition, low production, and low productivity of crops and animals. At this time, let me bring in my guest, who happens to be the Deputy Spokesperson of National Environmental Management Authority, the principal agency in Uganda that is responsible for managing the environment. Mr. Tony Achidri, welcome to Sol TV, and I would want you to speak about Bugoma Forest and the concerns of conservationists who have been talking about depletion of forests and more particularly the Bugoma forest. Talk about it, and especially talk about the ownership, as has been talked about by the person from NEMA.
Thank you, Apollo Tusime, and good evening to you and good evening to all the viewers of Salt Media, and thank you for having me. The issues of Bugoma cannot be discussed in isolation. To understand where this contention is coming from, you need to look at the issues from as far back as 2010, when government restituted properties back to the kingdoms. So the land in contention, it's actually in Changwali, was part of the properties that was given back to the Omukama as part of his property during the restitution exercise. So after 2010, in around 2013, the kingdom decided to do a survey of the land and proceed to apply for a title deed, which they acquired legally from the Land Commission. At that point, our colleagues, the National Forestry Authority, a contested decision. This was after the kingdom opted to lease out the land to Hoima Sugar. So National Forestry Authority contested the decision and went to court to, claiming that the land in question was part of Bugoma Central Forest Reserve. So what happened was in April 2019, court pronounced itself on the matter, on the ownership, and stated clearly that the land in question belongs to the Omukama. Our colleagues at NFA appealed this decision, and unfortunately for them, in December 2019, again court pronounced itself on the matter and confirmed that the land in question actually belongs to the kingdom. So at that point, the kingdom, having leased the land to Hoima Sugar went ahead to do a study and submitted an EIS study, upon which we based on to issue the certificate of approval, the ESIS certificate. Actually, we as NEMA stalled the process before because they wanted to develop this land while the matter was still in court. But we told them no. The land that you wish to develop, the ownership is still being contested between NFA and yourselves. So until the issue of ownership has been settled, we can't proceed to issue the certificate. So we waited until until court had been clear on the matter, on who owns the land, that the land belongs to the kingdom, and the kingdom having leased the land to Hoima Sugar, they were at liberty to use it as they will. However, NEMA as a regulatory agency, we are mandated to regulate sustainable development. And therefore we...
Go right ahead, Mr. Tony. Go right ahead.
Yes, Apollo?
Go right ahead.
Yes. I was saying, as an institution mandated to regulate sustainable development, we took the necessary steps. We went on ground, studied the documents available, and in fact, by the time we gave the certificate of approval, there are conditions attached to it. Some of the conditions therein are that instead of Hoima Sugar wanted to utilize the entire 22 square miles of land to develop the entire 22 square miles. However, after studying the conditions on ground, one of the conditions that we gave them is that they can only grow sugarcane on 9 square miles out of the 22. They're going to develop an urban center on 1 square mile, and there's going to be land used for ecotourism and cultural activities. That's about 1.9 square miles. So NEMA did not allow them to use the entire 22 square miles that they wanted to, but allowed them to use only 9 square miles for regulated activities. And in fact, if you look at the conditions in the certificate of approval that we issued to them, they are supposed to do restoration on 3.3 square miles of land. And that restoration includes protecting of the fragile ecosystems such as the rivers, wetlands, and the steep slopes. And also, they're supposed to do enrichment planting in an area that is covering about 3.8 square miles. So what NEMA has done is actually good for the environment, because the area in which where we approved the sugarcane growing is predominantly a grassland. There was no forest, and that we did after going to the ground to verify what was there.
Mr. Tony, talk about the options. Couldn't there have been other options instead of giving away this land, though the ownership could be attached to the kingdom as court ruled? Couldn't there have been any other options to have all the whole of this forest land preserved in the interest of preserving the environment?
Yes. You see, the land in question, the contention was whether it was part of Bugoma Central Forest Reserve or not, and that matter was decided in court, that the land in question is not part of the Central Forest Reserve. If indeed it was part of the Central Forest Reserve, there is no way we would have, there is no way a forest reserve can be sold, because if a forest reserve is to be sold, it has to first be degazetted, and that wasn't the case. The land in question was private property owned by the kingdom. And what we came in to do was to regulate the use of how that land can be used sustainably, how it can be developed for the benefit of the communities, of the environment, without disturbing the natural ecosystems.
From the decisions that you made and the outcome, are you contented that the part of the land, the contested land, will be sustainably managed in the interest of the environment, please?
Yes, I can confidently say that it will be managed it will be managed sustainably. Why? Because the conditions given in that EAIS certificate are thoroughly thought through. And besides, the certificate is valid for 5 years, upon which we can go back and do a review. And that is not all. Other components of the entire development are required to do separate ESIS. The components such as the urban center and auxiliary facilities such as the support facilities, if they're building roads within there, all these are supposed to do separate EIS for those particular components. So the entire activity is going to be handled sustainably, and NEMA is going to be on ground to monitor periodically, as we always do, to ensure that the entire development is carried out sustainably and there is nothing that will happen to the environment.
Okay, let's talk about the deficit between the forest cover that has been planted.
Sorry?
Let's talk about the deficit in the forest cover that has been planted and the forest cover that has been depleted. What are your thoughts on that deficit in the sense that we have planted little or we have conserved little, while much more of forest land is being depleted?
Yes, it's unfortunate that the forest cover in certain parts of the country has been going down, but there have been sustained efforts to try and sensitize people, to try and desist from indiscriminate cutting down of trees, especially for fuel wood and for timber. However, for the case of Bugoma specifically, one of the conditions that we put in the certificate that was issued to them was that they are supposed to carry out enrichment planting of a buffer zone that is about 3.8 square miles. And when they do it, and if it is done according to plan. Sorry?
All right, ahead, Mr. Tony.
Yes, I was saying one of the conditions that was given to them is that they're supposed to carry out enrichment planting in an area that is about 3.8 square miles, that is to buffer the actual Bugoma Central Forest Reserve. So if this is undertaken as according to plan, then there will be no encroachment on the forest. And to look at it from a wide...
Oh, go right ahead.
A wider perspective, I think you asked about the entire country. NEMA as an institution, we have also supported other agencies in reforestation drives. A case in point here is just last year we planted over 10,000 hectares of Oliduru Central Forest Reserve. That is in Otuke district, and we have been carrying out such activities across the country. During the last World Environment Day, we also distributed a number of seedlings to an area in Mukono that is around Namagunga, and encouraged them to do planting. The other year we were in Moroto, where we also did restoration. That included the planting of trees. So we are on ground in many of these areas, first to educate people about the dangers of deforestation, and also to encourage them to keep planting trees.
Tell us about your plan as an agency that is concerned or responsible with the preserving and managing the environment. Do you have a sustainable plan for the environment in this country? And can you assure Ugandans that in the next 50 or 100 so years, we will have reclaimed and restored the forest cover that we have lost over the years?
Yes, NEMA is not a conservation agency. We are an agency that does sustainable development. So our intention is that all the resources that we have in this country are used sustainably. And all these activities that we approve, the industries, the development projects like the roads, the dams, and all the big development projects are undertaken in such a way that the environment is not affected. And this you can verify with, with the trends of the, over the years. For example, just during during the lockdown, we did we did some sort of research on the industry, and we discovered that air pollution within the city, this is just as an example, is not from industries as had been previously thought. Instead, it is from the unsustainable transport systems. So because of our regulation of the industry sector, we can comfortably say that the environment is going to be managed sustainably. We have done it, and we are going to continue doing it.
Let's talk about policy. Have you developed a policy in yes. that line to preserve specifically the forests that have been existing? Do we have a policy in place?
Yes, we have policies in place. The National Forestry Act, which is under the custody of the National Forestry Authority, governs the the protection of forests. But if you're talking about policies, there is the National Environment Act. The latest one is the National Environment Act number 5 of 2019, which was which came into force just last year. It has it was adapted and has a lot of guidelines, a lot of guidances on how the environment has to be managed. Of course, in liaison with other lead agencies like NFA, UA, and the district local governments. So yes, in terms of policy, we have documents, and one of the key documents is the National Environment Act with the several regulations therein, and the supporting legislations for forestry and the likes, which are under the custody of the National Forestry Authority.
Be honest, with all those policies, why are we seeing these, incidents happening, people, depleting and cutting down forests and everywhere? Why is it happening? Where is the missing link? Where is the gap?
Sorry?
With the policy in place, with regulations in place, why is the forest cover vanishing? Why are we seeing people going to forests and clearing forests? Why is it happening? Where is the link, the missing gap?
The missing gap still comes from the fact, from looking at our history, how were natural resources managed before. Okay, in 1995, if you are aware, natural resources were government took over all natural resources and owned them for the benefit, as a public good, for the benefit of all members of the country, for the entire country. However, before 1995, natural resources, some of them were privately owned. There were certain land titles in certain places. But after the 1995 environment law, and government took over these these natural resources, then those who owned them previously needed to be compensated. So it has been a gradual process within which it is all being consolidated, in that ownership is now known, and that before use is approved, studies have to be conducted so that the use is sustainable. So the gap we are seeing is that in terms of management of these resources, how was it before and how is it now? And it is in this transition period where much of the degradation has happened. However, with the new policies in place, we are seeing a trend that is going for the better. It is gradual, but it is happening.
Can you assure Ugandans that what we have been seeing, the gloomy scenes we've seen in, forests being cut down for various purposes, can you assure Ugandans that probably we will not see those incidents in the future?
No, you will not see indiscriminate cutting without following the necessary guidelines and without getting the necessary approvals, because as it is now, it is illegal to cut down trees within a central forest reserve. Okay, so there are policies in place, they are being enforced. There might be challenges here and there, but we are moving for the positive. That is why there are these legislations being put in place. That is why there are enforcements being put in place. And for your information, in regard to the National Environment Management Authority, the number of things in the National Environment Act that that have been proposed and some endorsed, things like an environment protection force, things like fines that can be that can be made, that culprits that are convicted for certain environment crimes can be made to pay, and a number of other things to manage the environment.
Mr. Tony Achidria, the Senior Public Relations Officer and Deputy Spokesperson for National Environmental Management Authority, the principal agency that is responsible for management of the environment in Uganda. Thank you so much, Mr. Tony, and we must thank our viewers. The Limelight every Friday, and at this time we say good evening.